said, this question, should sanya be better translated as recognition instead of perception? Is perceiving good and bad a function of vijnana instead of sanya? Okay, well, these words, sanya, it's referring to that the third aggregate. So we talked about the 5 aggregates today. In the first aggregate,
form.
Material form. Basically, that's the vibrations. Actually, it's actually the vibrations of like color that come to your eye. So it's a vibration of color in a certain shape. That's the material form. But then recognizing this as a monk in a robe, that's perception. That's memory. So sanya is memory. So yes, it is recognition, but it's also a perception, because a perception actually singles out. It's more than just recognition, because perception means to mark it out. So if there was no perception, you looking up here, you would only see a mass of colors, all kind of one-dimensional. Nothing would stand out. It's the function of sanya to take particular colors and shapes and then make them stand out different from the other things around it. And then we recognize it. But the function of sanya is to mark the characteristic of something, separate. Otherwise, you all this would just blend into a mass of color. So every time you look around, the mind is drawing out, particular things, and you see the differences between them. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to tell them. But then, because of our language and learning, we've given those things names. So, but basically, it's the ability for a particular object to stand out from the others around it. So that's part of the function of sanya too. And because of the habit and of the desire to see, is perceiving good and bad. Perception is based on the feeling. If the feeling is a painful feeling, the perception will be a painful perception. If the feeling is a pleasant feeling, the perception will be a pleasant perception. So, if let's say, all of a sudden you see somebody you don't like, or you really don't like, and you don't want to meet them, you don't want to talk to them, and let's say then it's like you see them, that cause a painful feeling, but also it's a painful perception because you'd rather not see that person. Okay, so it's based on the feeling and perception. And then also the reaction is the same, because the reaction will be a negative reaction to the painful perception. Or you saw a decaying dog on the side of the road, so that's a painful perception, and that's a painful reaction. And again, that's all a habit. And it says it's perceiving a function of vijnana instead of...
Perceiving good and bad, I don't mean perceiving painful feeling, pleasant feeling, or disgusting thing. I mean discriminating between wholesome and unwholesome?
That's the sankhara is the discrimination of
Oh,
the
sankhara
object.
is intention, right? The Buddha in many
No,
sutras-
it's also the sankhara is any habit formation. It's not only intention. Sankhara is a very big category.
Yeah, but as a factor of the aggregate and as a link of dependent origination, I read some suttas. The Buddha defined sankhara in dependent origination as intention, right?
Don't get too intellectual on it, okay?
Okay.
There's a lot of different, Buddha said a lot of different things in different sutras depending on the situation and what he was teaching too. But, so sankhara is, this chair is a sankhara. It's made up of different things. Is there an intention in the chair? No, it's made up of different things. It's a sankhara. It's a composite. So a sankhara can be an intention. It can be the actual action of scratching. But the intention is what causes the arm to lift up and scratch. But the arm lifting up and scratch is also a sankhara. The habit, the cells and habit muscles, muscles have memory, right? Doctors talk about muscle memory, right? In sports. Yeah. Okay? Well, that's a sankhara because it's a habit that's been created. But the intention to do it starts in the mind. But they're all sankharas. So there's mental sankharas, there's vachi sankhara, there's 3 types of sankhara. Kaya sankhara, vachi sankhara, and mano sankhara. And they're all included within the realm of sankhara. So it's, it's sometimes these words are, they have a lot of deep meaning, and we may hear only one part of it sometimes, in certain sutras and so on, but, there's other things can be pertain to it as well. So this is another question about sankhara. Is sankhara as a factor of the 5 aggregates the same as sankhara as a link of dependent origination? Yes. But it's not just limited to will. So, yeah, the sankhara of, well, we've already mentioned the sankhara of the aggregates is basically it's all the reactions, and it's the result of past karma. So when we create the karma, when we do an action, an intentional action, like say, okay, I'm going to reach up and scratch an itch. So the sankhara is because that habit has been created in the past. So the habit of being disturbed by an itch and wanting to scratch it, that is what triggers off, that's the sankhara. And then when I actually do it again, that strengthens the sankhara, re-strengthens that then in turn becomes the source of generating the next sankhara. But if I can reduce that sankhara, so there's a sankhara urge to want to scratch, the will, but if I don't actually scratch it, and I apply wisdom and restraint, and I say, no, that itch is not that bad, I'm not going to scratch. And I don't. That weakens the sankhara. And that weakens that sankhara because I didn't repeat the habit. And if I can do that enough, hundreds and thousands of times, that sankhara will just fade away. It will lose its power and stop coming up. That's the whole, Dhamma is all made up. That's how Dhamma, that's what the Dhamma is. Weakening the negative sankharas and cultivating the wholesome sankharas. Until in the end, all the sankharas can be let go of. But first we have to cultivate the wholesome sankharas. That means the wholesome habits. Like getting up early in the morning to meditate. That's a sankhara. That's a wholesome sankhara. The practice of meditation is a sankhara. So you have to see it in that way. And then, the sankhara in the, I don't know if everybody's familiar with all these Pali terms, but in the dependent origination, we were reading that actually just now, in the puja. So, of course, it was in English, so you didn't see the Pali words in that, what we were reading. But the sankhara there is the
volitional formations.
The second.
Volitional formations.
Wait a second. Yeah, so the volitional formations, dependent on ignorance, arise the volitional formations. But the volitional formations, again, it's the unconscious contents of the mind. And it's the simile given to volitional formations is like a potter making pots. So if how many people have seen the Tibetan Wheel of Life painting? We have one right down here, actually. Take a look at it next time you go in the dining hall, the Wheel of Life. So it's depicted as somebody sitting down making pots. So a potter churning out pots. And that's what the mind does. Everything is churned out by the mind. So depending on that is what, and that is the repository of the karma we've created. And so that is going to generate the consciousness. And so sankharas that then, dependent on the volitional formations, arises consciousness. So it's all those different accumulated habits. So basically they're pretty much the same. People might make a big deal out of trying to nitpick and make them look different or so on, but for all intents and purposes, they're the same. So this looks like the same person has written off these questions. A stream winner must correctly or comprehend the 5 aggregates. Well, I'm not going to, these are all speculative questions, and I'm not going to answer that, and go into the writer of the Abhidhamma and all that. I'm not going to go into answer that. All these things that you read about, whether it's Abhidhamma or in the sutras, they should be considered general guidelines, and not to nitpick too much into a lot of the details and so on, because again, different authors and different monks have interpreted these terms, sankhara and other things, and even rebirth. There's some Buddhist monks that say Buddha didn't even teach rebirth and all that. So there's all kind of differences of opinion that you will come across if you study quite in detail different books, especially if you're in commentaries and suttas and so on. So some of it, have to be taken with a grain of salt and not try to nitpick too much or try to pinpoint down something very specifically. There should be kind of general guidelines to get a good understanding. And then the meditation, that is your guideline, is the meditation. You're using the sutras and things you read to put your mind on the right guideline. And then the inherent wisdom that comes out of concentration and mindfulness will answer your questions. So that's the way we should try to use the teachings.
Started to practice, find your motivation to really keep the routine, to get up, like early in the morning, like you said, every day, and to really maintain it over time. What was your motivation to do that?
By realizing the preciousness of the human birth and how valuable it is, and not to waste it, and also the inevitability of death, and that I have the perfect conditions, what are called the Tibetan. Actually, it's a meditation teaching that's prominent in Tibetan teachings, although you'll find it also in Theravada suttas too, about having the right conditions to practice the Dhamma. And not everybody has those right conditions. And so when I got had my powerful kind of transforming experience, I realized I had the right conditions, There was nothing holding me back, I didn't have the previous karma of having gotten entangled in any, relationship with a person, or had been married, or had any kids, or anything else, or, nothing holding me back, and I had that interest, and I had the freedom and the travel and so on, and not everybody has all that, especially at that time, like that was back in the early 70s, and half the world couldn't travel because, like in Russia, no one could travel. It was all communism, All the travelers to India at the time were British, European, and Americans, 95%. You didn't see, Czechs or Poles or, Russians, but now you mostly see them now because they were in prison. Now they're free, they wanted to travel. But see, at that time, so, it had made more sense then, that I was born in a free country, and I was born with good parents who encouraged me to learn and gave me the freedom to do things, and had the freedom to travel, and, wasn't too poor, wasn't too rich. If you're too rich, you don't have much interest in Dhamma. And if you're too poor, you can't travel. But, I had all this middle path, the conditions, And so and also I had the past karma to, get attracted to the Dhamma, basically that. And so if you have those perfect conditions, to let them go, it's sort of like spitting in heaven, And so that aroused my sense of urgency, and also the reflection on death. That death can happen at any time, and I saw the defilements in my mind at that time, and the desire to try to do something about it, turn my life around. Because just before that, I had been in prison in Afghanistan. I could have been died there. I could have been murdered. Or I could have overdosed on drugs. But Dhamma turned all that around. And so, anyway, so basically it's that, it's recognizing that if you have all those conditions and freedoms, what are called the freedoms, and also the mental state and in the past karmic conditions, then you have to guard that like a precious treasure. But some people had those too, but still, because of past karma, they couldn't really maybe do it, and they wind up giving it up, or they just practiced at a kind of a not such an intensive level and so on. But everyone is unique, everyone is different in that regard. There's, of all the 7 billion people on Earth now, no two people are the same.
But people can change their present karma, right? They're not bound, even if it's not so much that the practice is, even if their previous karmas is not so much favoring the condition for the practice, they can change that, right?
Yes, they can, and people do. But a lot of people don't. It's a matter of canning and then doing it. Theoretically, everybody can, but practically speaking, karma is going to come up and cause problems. So that's why, if a person's really interested in Dhamma, you have to be careful about what you get into and what you commit to. One person, when I was at the Bhavana Society, they came to the Bhavana Society, "Oh, I want to be a monk, I want to be a monk." I said, "Oh, really? Are you married?" She says, "Yeah." Can't become a monk. This guy wanted to run away from his marriage and become a monk, basically. Or other people escaped from the police, saying they go in a monastery and shave their head and put on a robe and put to a record. No, we won't accept people like that. So these are not the good reasons to do it. I forgot, why did I even start on that? What was that question?
About your motivation.
About what?
I had asked you about your motivation, and then I asked you about changing the karma.
Oh, yeah. So, we can change. I changed. I changed almost overnight from, just a drug-taking hippie and just following the crowd and, doing a lot of unskillful things. And, but the Dhamma, just hit me so hard that I was able to turn it around, at least, to a certain extent.
Bhante, to follow up that, maybe a silly statement, but didn't the Buddha was married, right? He left his family.
Let's not get into that argument. But the Buddha was the Buddha. That was all planned. That was preordained.
And his family rejoined him after.
Yeah, they all became enlightened.
They were well cared for. It was a palace setting and all that. I guess it's a difference.
Yeah.
You can't really compare.
One day, how about Angulimala killed 100,000 people? How can he become enlightened? So what karma did he have?
Well, people, I don't know. Does everybody know the story of Angulimala?
Yeah.
Or maybe some don't. But, so you have to understand the previous conditions of this ahimsaka.
It's not intention.
He was a very good person, a very good student, and he was kind of forced into doing this because of customs and so on, and tradition. And so, he may have, murdered those people, but underneath he had these good qualities. And, there's sometimes you read in the sutras that don't make sense. How can this person do that? So we have to take some of it with a grain of salt. And there are certain exceptions, and sometimes there's more to things that we can fathom with our mind. Like we can't fathom the power that a Buddha has. We try to think and figure out how does the Buddha do all that. We go mad. We don't have the power to do that, or to understand so many things. That's why a very nice statement, a popular little short sutta, is the Buddha was teaching Dhamma to these monks, a lot of monks out in the forest. It was in the fall, autumn, when the leaves would fall on the ground. Then he said, he took up a handful of leaves and he asked the monks, "What is more, monks, the leaves in my hand or all the leaves on the ground in all the forests?" And the monk said, "Oh, of course, the leaves in your hand are nothing compared to all the leaves in the forest." And then he said, in the same way, what I've taught you to overcome suffering is like the leaves in my hand compared to the knowledge of the universe or every other thing that I may know, that he may have known. But those are not important for your enlightenment. Those are not important. Don't burden your mind with wanting to know how many planets are out there in the solar system, or how many Sukhavati's are there, or all this other stuff. Don't worry about it. What's important was the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, 37 requisites of enlightenment, and all these roots of trees and so on. That's what's important. Don't worry about all the other things. So it's a very nice statement that he made. Or there was another person that was shot by an arrow. He got shot by a poisoned arrow. And then a man came over, was going to pull out the arrow. And this man who was there shot by the arrow, he was, suffering in pain. And somebody wanted to pull the arrow out, to try to save the guy. He said, wait, don't pull out that arrow. First I want to know who shot the arrow. What's his father's name? What kind of wood was that bow made out of? What kind of feathers, bird feathers were on that arrow? Before he got all the answers to those questions, he'd be dead. So the same way the Buddha refused to answer some questions that people came and asked him, like, is the world eternal? Is the world not eternal? Is the world both eternal and not eternal, or neither eternal or neither non-eternal? Is the soul and the body the same, different, neither or both? All these questions that the Buddha refused to answer. And some monks said, if you don't answer these questions, I'm going to disrobe. And the Buddha said, when you wanted to become a monk, did I ever tell you I was going to answer you all those questions? And disrobed him. The Buddha's not going to answer those questions because they can't be answered satisfactorily. Everyone will say, but when I heard this, it can go on indefinitely. That's why the Buddha sometimes just kept silent about all these different speculative questions and so on. So, any last questions? Okay, so we'll go ahead and again just to take a deep, slow breath, kind of let all that excitement of looking outside, let go of that. Take a deep, slow breath, bring the